Just talking musicals with you. Hello, my name is Lesley Knight and welcome to Just Talking Musicals. These days, when Broadway fans look back on the roll call of composers' names from the early days of musicals, it's easy to just assume this talented clutch of writers and composers were part of some kind of elite group who were all well acquainted with one another by virtue of their common talent. Names like Irving Berlin, Jerome Kern, George Gershwin and his brother Ira, Cole Porter, Richard Rodgers, Lawrence Hart and Oscar Hammerstein II. I grew up being so familiar with their names that it felt like they were part of musical theatre history even before anyone realised there was such a thing. And so, the charming idea that Jerome Kern and Oscar Hammerstein II first met in one of the most unlikely places, a cemetery, really grabbed my attention when I was researching Showboat a few years ago. According to some historians, the cemetery in question was more than likely the Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, where the by then well-established composer Jerome Kern and the up-and-coming young lyricist and book writer Oscar Hammerstein II were both attending the funeral of the much-revered composer Victor Herbert. Famed composer of such hits as The Red Mill and Naughty Marietta, Victor Herbert had suddenly died of a heart attack in May 1924, just as he was leaving his doctor's surgery with an assured clean bill of health. Not such a great day for Victor Herbert then, but a most fortuitous one for Kern and Hammerstein. And even if the tale is somewhat apocryphal, it still piqued my own curiosity to dig a little deeper into how these two talented individuals came to write to such an outstanding piece of work that it became known as the first true musical play. Now, in 1926, Edna Ferber's novel Showboat was the latest bestseller to catch the nation's imagination, and so the story goes. It was one day in Long Island that Oscar Hammerstein got a phone call from his friend Jerome Kern, asking him if he'd read this new novel and how he thought this book, with its $1 million title, would make a great musical play. Apparently, Kern had so far only read half the book, but Hammerstein set to and read it from cover to cover, and when they later discovered they had both created identical layouts of how they would turn it into a show, all that remained was to find a willing producer with a theatre and receive a kindly nod of approval from Miss Ferber, and Showboat the musical was on its way. So, what's Showboat actually about? In the first pages of the novel, Edna Ferber sets out the leading characters of her story. There's Captain Andy Hawkes, the steamboat captain and owner of the Cotton Blossom Floating Palace Theatre, and Parthenia Ann, his rather censorious, spinsterly-minded wife, who possesses the keenest eye for clamping down on the merest sign of frivolity. And then there's their beautiful daughter, Magnolia, who falls in love with and marries a charming actor-gambler by the name of, wait for it, Gaylord Ravenel. And in time they have a daughter of their very own who pursues a life on the stage as well. Add to this the leading lady Julie and her husband Steve, pretty Ellie Chipley and her husband. Then there's the cook, Queenie, and her husband Joe, the stevedore. And they all live, work and sail together on their showboat along the panoramic majesty of the Mississippi River. And so this magnificent tale begins on the river, on board the Cotton Blossom Floating Palace Theatre, and gradually the story of each of these characters unfolds, with the marriage of the daughter Magnolia to the river gambler Ravenel, the drama of Julie and Steve when a jealous admirer reports them to the local sheriff for their mixed marriage, which unbelievably for us today was actually illegal in many southern states at the turn of the 20th century. And at the heart of this story is the inescapable bond of friendships forged and loyalty forged, spanning 47 years, watched over not just by the steadfast Joe and Queenie, but by the enigmatic presence of the river itself. By the way, it really is a wonderful read, and not as long as its 47 years of family history might suggest. Here it is. It really is a wonderful book, and I guarantee you'll love reading it. And look, it's not so long as that 47 years suggests. It's wonderful. Edna Ferber, and this is a copy of the first edition. Showboat, Edna Ferber. I love it. Back to the story. Kern and Hammerstein then decided to pitch their idea for a musical to the great Florence Ziegfeld, arguably the most famous of all American theatrical showmen at the turn of the century. Ziegfeld was renowned for his lavish revue, The Ziegfeld Follies, with not much plot but plenty of glamour, based on the highly successful Folies Bergère from the Moulin Rouge in Paris. In 1926, Ziegfeld was on the verge of opening his new theatre, the Ziegfeld, and Kern and Hammerstein's timing must have seemed quite perfect. Having agreed to take on the show, Ziegfeld possibly didn't comprehend the nature of this new venture, as it became clear that Kern and Hammerstein's idea for this musical play was a far cry from the fun and frolics of a Ziegfeld revue. This new piece had, above all else, a storyline and songs which were carefully woven into the plot. Heralded as a musical comedy, there was much more to it than that, and partly due to Ziegfeld's anxiety about opening his new theatre with the right show, Showboat found itself number 2 on the list of shows opening at the prestigious theatre in 1927. But as the production got underway, so too did the work of creating beautiful, memorable songs. With Showboat, Hammerstein could put into action everything he had learned from his mentor, lyricist Otto Harbach, to weave a song into the fabric of a story so that it truly belonged in the piece. And in Jerome Kern, he had a truly sympathetic collaborator who also firmly believed in the integration of songs into the plot. And they set about creating together a piece of theatre which not only told a heartwarming story, but pricked at people's consciences at the same time. Kern's music was a genius mix of operetta, jazz and African-American spiritual, effortlessly evoking the romance of the era. Coupled with the music is an instantly compelling storyline which set the tone for many of Hammerstein's later musicals. After all, raising the thorny issue of racism and bigotry amidst a compelling story set to beautiful music is one surefire way of making your audience sit back and reflect. The final score for this musical came to be laced with enchanting songs like Make Believe, Can't Help Loving That Man, Old Man River, Life Upon the Wicked Stage and Why Do I Love You, which was reputedly the whistling song of the show, the one that Charles Winninger, who played Captain Andy on Broadway, said Ziegfeld had insisted on. It was the all-important song to make people whistle as they left the theatre. Kern and Hammerstein would often work apart, with Hammerstein calling Kern up on the phone to sing him the latest lyrics. And so it was during the long months of writing that Edna Ferber herself had an unexpected visitor at her front door one day. In her memoir she wrote, Jerome Kern appeared at my apartment late one afternoon with a strange look of quiet exultation in his eyes. He sat down at the piano. He played and sang Old Man River. The music mounted, and I give you my word. My hair stood on end, the tears came to my eyes. I breathed like a heroine in a melodrama. This was great music. This was music that would outlast Jerome Kern's day and mine. Right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Next time we'll be looking at the tales behind Showboat's spectacular opening night and how an aspiring Broadway star's choice of a blue hat unexpectedly brought her Hollywood fame. I'm Lesley Ann Knight. Behind the camera is the wonder that is the show's producer, Katie Ridout. You can find Just Talking Musicals on Facebook, and we're lurking on Twitter as well under the name of @Knight&Ridout. And click subscribe for each new episode alert so you can bag the best front row seats for each new show. See you here again very soon for another instalment of Just Talking Musicals. Just talking musicals with you. Do you know, because I haven't got heels on, it's really difficult to sit right.
I love those shoes.
They're mine.
I know they're yours.